logins, etc. that you can grant permission to is available in this SSIS DB. So in other words, if I open up the security section, okay, these database users, I also create a Bob user right here. Now the Bob user isn't connected to anything. It can also be connected to a Windows login if I want to. So I can right click and say new user and connect that to a Windows login user, EventualWorks student or something like that. Okay, so here I just create a SQL user without login called Bob. Now this is the security principle that I can say, hey, Bob is allowed to, for example, Bob is allowed to grant read but deny execute. So Bob comes in, can see these packages, cannot modify them, and cannot execute them. So that's the permission model. There's also one more permission called manage permission. I think that's self-explanatory. Very cool. Now, typically in an environment, you want the SSIS DB to be centralized. Okay, each developer has their own environment in Visual Studio to make sure the package works. Once that is done, the next step is to move these packages to a centralized place where people can execute them. For example, using SQL Server Agent for scheduling, and a centralized place like the dashboard to monitor things. Okay, so you can say, let me see all the executions from this project. I can easily right-click, select Reports, and go to All Executions. It's going to show me for this project, we have succeeded one time. And I could also execute that. Choose an environment where I want to run this under. Now run the package. Because I run it with the production environment, I expect to see my output file 11. No, this is not 11 demo, this is 12 demo. So I would expect to see those files in my production, but they're not. Why? Maybe it's not really outputting a file. Okay. Maybe just pretend to output a file and the package itself doesn't output a file. Is that what it is? Okay, ran them both. I don't see any files. Production DB, production. Maybe I just didn't specify the right folder. It's a possibility. Okay. Production DB, production logins. Execute. Deployment demo, output folder, folder path. DB list file in production environment. Looks right. Unless my production environment didn't have the right settings. Demo files, mod 12 production. I might just have to open up this package and see what this package is doing, because I think I've been lied to. That could happen, right? So I'm going to open up the package and figure out why it's not writing to where it's supposed to write to. So here's extract DB list. Have an output folder. My project parameter required true. Get DB list. So it's using the project output folder plus DB. Yeah, it should use the right thing, but it's not. The good thing is that this is a demo code, so I can spend some time troubleshooting it while you do your lab. Okay, but the idea is the environment can supply these values, and as the package execute, simply switch the environment allows it to connect different values to the package. All right, so talk about deploying them, no problem. Viewing execution information. Now there is a dashboard that can tell you the execution histories, right? Above and beyond that, remember these are things that we have learned as part of a package design. Okay, just because the package was executed, the execution moved from your local Visual Studio to a server. Okay, just because you're moving them doesn't mean your event handler gets disabled. Does not mean your error output disappears. Your logging doesn't work. They all still work the same exact way. Okay, if you have logging or error output configured, they will report to whatever you configure them to. Okay. All right. So run SSIS package. We've seen that already. All right. So now your SSIS package is safe and sound in your catalog. So how do we actually run them? Couple choices. Do what I just did. Find your package, right-click, execute. Now, there's also command line version. You can combine the dtexec and dtexec UI with a PowerShell, and if you're a PowerShell user, you can create schedule task from Windows system that launches PowerShell and then in turn launches dtexec. Pretty homebrew stuff. Now, if you want something that is more polished, you have SQL Server Agent. Okay, so while you schedule the ETL process, pay attention to your data acquisition windows. Make sure you are having enough time to actually finish all your package. And any particular execution order. Okay, so you might have, let's say, package, you may want A followed by B followed by C if they're separate packages. Okay, so make sure you execute them in the right order. And execution dependencies. So here's an example. If A succeed, do package B. And if package A fails, do package C. You're thinking, wait a minute, I can do this in package. You absolutely can. But if you want to separate into individual packages and still have that kind of control, you can use SQL Server Agent to do that. Okay. All right, so it's much easier to talk about execution context right from here. Okay, so our package sits in the catalog and they're safe, they're good, they're happy, right? Now we have our SQL Server Agent to schedule things. So these are jobs. Okay, so I'm going to create a new job. Run demo job. Now, every SQL agent job has the concept of steps. And I'll call this GenDB login. Each step has a type. There's one kind of job specific designed for SSIS called SSIS package job step. So when you select that item, the interface will change. Now run S controls your security context. We'll get back to that in just a moment. So here's SSIS catalog, and we can say which server, which package do we want. So I'm going to do that. SSIS DB, here's my demo. Okay, now the configurations. Which environment do I want to run this under? So there's test, there's production. And it's a folder path. Parameter, deployment demo, upload folder. Looks good. Connection manager, localhost, use DB server. Okay. New job step. Step 1. SQL, and let's look at this demo guy. So we're going to say extract DB list and configure to use an environment, so that works. Okay, so connection manager would also supply the DB server name from the environment. Okay, that's about it. Okay. And notice it says on success, go to the next step, or on success, simply quit the job. On failure, what it wanted to do, go to the next step. On failure, and so on. Okay, so click on OK. So that will be step 1, and you can have another step called step 2 that run the other package. Tired of typing. Dot works just fine. And this one does the login. Same drill, configuring a different environment. Okay, so now you can say, oops, step 1. On success, go to the next step. On failure, quit the job. You can also say on success, quit a job. On failure, go to step 2. So now you can control this type of activities. Okay, this type of basic workflow between packages. So we'll cancel on that. All right, and because it's a job, right? A job is something to do when. So you specify your schedule. You can pick from the existing schedule. There's already a bunch of schedule, right? So you can pick one of these guys. Or you can define your own schedule. I want to run the weekly, daily, at what time? 12 a.m. When does it start? Boom. Let's say you can have multiple schedules too. Another. So the same action will be performed monthly on the first of every month or on the last day of every month, so on and so forth. Bam. All right, so it's pretty customizable. Alerts, self-explanatory, right? While you're running some jobs, now folks, remember this is a generic job system. This is not an SSIS dedicated job system. So in other words, other kinds of actions can generate all kinds of alert. So this is where you can say, for this type of alert, what should we do? So if I see, something, so for example, deadlock. Okay, and I can say monitor anything that's fatal error in resources. Okay, or raise an alert when the message contains deadlock. And what do I want to do to respond to that event? That's actually not a fatal error. That's probably one of these miscellaneous user errors. All right, so in the response, actually, deadlock is not a user error. Deadlock is like developer error. So whatever. So informational. And what do you want to do? You typically may want to notify someone, such as notify an operator. Okay. And we don't have any operator yet, so you can define one. All right, so these are all pretty straightforward, including the errors in the text. So I'm going to cancel that for alerts. Notifications, this is not monitoring problems. These are simply when the job complete or when the job fails. Okay, so you need to define an operator with email address to select from this drop-down box. Okay, now agent can also do something called multi-server jobs. You can create a job that runs on multiple machines. These are typically for maintenance stuff, like backup, recreate index, and so on. Not applicable typically to SSIS. So click on OK there. And now you have a run demo job. You can see the error logs from the job run. So if you right click and say start job as step what? So I'm going to say start the job as step 1. Go ahead and do it. And I can see from the log interestingly, you can even define an idle CPU condition. That means when CPU is not doing anything, run something. So yeah, you can say, hey, this job should run whenever the CPU is kind of doing nothing. Okay. All right, so cool. And this is running. You can right-click on any job and say View History. And this is going to tell you the history of the job run. Did step 1 succeed? Did step 2 succeed? When did it happen? Who was running it? And so on and so forth. And interestingly, it's going to tell you what is the user that is running this package. So remember the context that I said we're going to talk about? By default, the SQL Server agent runs under the SQL agent identity. So how do you find that? So right here. So when you go to Tools Services in your Server Manager, you'll find SQL Server Agent. Each instance has their own agent. And that becomes the default account. Now, of course, if you're doing DTL, chances are that account is not going to give you the right permission, right? Who's going to use service account to actually DTL from various production system? This is crazy. Extremely insecure. So what we could do is we may want to use a non-SQL Server agent account to actually run these jobs, right? So, and also that's entirely separate from operator. Operator is just a way of notifying them. So here is Bob, and his email name is Bob and at blah.com. That's his email, and that's about it. Okay, so you can see what is being sent to Bob. So this is nothing to do with execution context. This is just for notifications, right? Remember this? So when this job fails, email Bob, let him know. Okay, that's not the execution context. The execution context comes from credentials. So let's say you need to be this guy when you do your ETL. So here is where we store the password. You need to be this guy in order to read from the various data source. Okay, so here we first set up a credential called student. You can even make it descriptive for ETL. Why? Why can I not type password? Student for ETL. Here's my identity. Oh, it's not. Do I have a student one? AdventureWorks student 1. Come on, student. Okay, so I found it. So the student AdventureWorks, fantastic. So I found this guy, AdventureWorks student. Good. And I no longer have faith in me typing password, so I'm going to do that. Say OK. Thank you. All right, so now I have a credential. Credential can be used as proxies. Okay, so as a DBA, I would say, I'm going to create a proxy to run SSIS package. Oh, snap. All right, folks, I'm back. That was that hunk of metal overhead that sucked up my radio frequency signals. It's quite amazing. All right, so back to what we were talking about. We created the credential thingy, right? Folks, can you all hear me? Just checking in. Oh, the screen's not shared. That's right. That's right. I had to stop sharing for a moment. Sorry about that. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, awesome. Awesome. All right, so I create this credential, and this credential, think of them as saved username and password. Okay. Now, just because there's a credential, okay, there's a saved username and password. That's that. Okay. Now I can go ahead and create a proxy for SSIS use. So this proxy will be called for SSIS use. It's only allowed to run SSIS packages. It's not allowed to run any other kind of job. Okay. And who is able to schedule a job using this credential? Okay, so I'm going to say, well, AdventureWorks administrator, AdventureWorks student, these are all people who can use this credential. Now, by using this, I have set up a layer of abstraction. So in other words, if AdventureWorks administrator comes in and say, I want to run ETL, he can use this proxy account while never know what was the password to go into each source system, right? Because we don't want AdventureWorks /Bob or Tom or Joe to be able to go to all the source database systems, start running queries. So we want to keep that away from these guys who runs and schedule the agent job. Okay, so those are the principle that's allowed to use the proxy account. So these are the guys who can use the proxy account to schedule jobs. So when the job actually runs, it uses that credential as the execution context. Okay. So let's take a look. So here we have it. SSIS package execution. If I refresh, okay, so I can see that here is a proxy. So let's go back to the job that we had. Okay, you may notice the step contains a run as. Once you have the proxy, you can now run as somebody else. Okay, that's that. And I want to double click on that and do also another run as. Okay. Something just blacked out on me. I don't know why. Folks, can you guys still see me? Good. What was that? Did you guys see the blackout screen? No? Okay. Did like an essay just disconnected or something? Folks, can you all still see my screen? Just checking. Fantastic. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and run this job. Now this time, I'm going to run the job the second time. Okay. And still recording. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and look at the history of this guy. So notice I ran them 10 minutes apart. Let's blow this up. So notice now the execution context has changed. I've used now the student context. So if Bob comes in and schedules a job using this proxy because we granted him the rights to use this proxy, he never have to know the password going to each of these systems. So it creates a layer of abstractions. Okay, so that's the execution credential because that's like a pain point when you're scheduling these jobs. All right, so that's your job scheduling subsystem. Any questions, folks? Execution context and all that good stuff. All right. Any questions, folks? All right, and it's also fair to say if you are working with SSIS, you might be the one that's responsible for the SQL agent jobs. Okay, so you may also want to spend some time looking at the job system and see what other things can the job system do for you, because there are going to be times it's just easier to do certain things in Transact SQL directly without going to the SSIS. There are times where you need to run an operating system command or even a PowerShell command. Now, if you're familiar with the SQL agent job system, then you might start looking at your package and say, well, perhaps this can be done by agent independent of my package. Okay. And only when that succeeds should my package run. So the more you're comfortable with the agent subsystem, the more flexible your package can be. Okay, so knowing that. All right, so augment your SSIS package with SQL agent and make sure you try to keep your package modular. Why? So they're reusable. Okay. Ensure all processes are documented somewhere. Okay. Try to learn about Team Foundation server source control tools. So it helps you document things in a way it can be easily found. Okay, so I don't have a Team Foundation server in the VM to show you that kind of stuff, but I have a Team Foundation server on my local machine. That Visual Studio project is just like any other project, can be source controlled, and as soon as you make changes, you will be able to record why a change take place, for what reason. So it keeps things well documented. All right, so there is the procedure to implement jobs and schedules, and this is what you do in the lab time, folks. We have this lab until lunch. It should be enough time. It's all mostly point and click. There's no writing anything. Okay, so I'll lead you guys through this. We'll take a lunch at 12 o'clock to 1, just like we always do.